So what exactly is the deal with Ichigo's true Bankai? I think it's fair to say that the final version of Tensa Zangetsu has left a lot of us scratching our heads ever since it was first revealed, and it's safe to say there are no real concrete answers as to what's actually going on with the final version of Ichigo's famous Bankai. And it's safe to say that this version of Tensa Zangetsu looks absolutely nothing like any previous iteration, now taking on the form of a massive white and black blade that seems to be a fusion of the two swords he had in Shikai. But Ichigo's final Bankai has a habit of breaking, infamously snapping in two like a twig the moment it was summoned against Yhwach, and then in the very final moment of the last battle of Bleach, when Ichigo takes that fateful swing, what we once thought was just a part of the Bankai breaks away like a casing, revealing apparently his original Shikai. And it's safe to say that we've never really had any answers, anything definitive about what's actually going on here. The eagle-eyed among you may have noticed that I didn't put the word explained in the title, and there's a simple reason for that. As far as Ichigo's true Bankai goes, I don't actually know, and to say I do wouldn't be telling the truth at all. This is my best guess as to what's actually going on with Tensa Zangetsu, and what I think is happening in that final moment where the sword shatters, revealing apparently Ichigo's old Shikai. So this is my best guess based on the evidence we're presented with in the manga, and what I think's going on, as someone who I think has a decent grasp on Kubo, his themes, and Bleach as a whole. But of course, if you have any theories, please let me know them in the comments below. I know that Ichigo's true Bankai has stumped people for years since it was released. And before we get started, if you haven't subscribed yet, guys, make sure to hit that button now. I'd really appreciate the support, and if you love Bleach, you are in the perfect place for content like this every single week. Also, don't forget to give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, because that does really help with the exposure on YouTube. And we do also now have a Patreon as well if you want to support the channel that little bit further. That would go a long way to helping me do what I love, which is talking about Bleach. So I want to say a big thanks to everyone who has helped out with the channel so far. So I think to get a real understanding of what's actually going on with Ichigo's true Bankai, there are a couple of things we need to understand. There's a running theme throughout the 1,000-Year Blood War arc of understanding one's true self, or finding one's true form. We see it with numerous characters, whether that's Renji finding out his true Bankai name, Sou Zabimaru, Rukia using the true version of Sode no Shirayuki against Asnot, Mayuri revealing the true version of Konjiki Ashisogi Jizo, Komamura removing the armor of Kokujo Tengen Myo to reveal what's actually underneath. There's a lot of this sort of thing in the 1,000-Year Blood War arc, and it also heavily applies to Ichigo. This is a character who is a essentially perfect hybrid of all the races in Bleach, something that has been mocked by fans over time, but I do think it works really well, and it explains why Ichigo is so powerful, but it also explains why it's so difficult for him to pinpoint exactly where his power comes from and who he really is. And of course, going back to that theme of finding out the truth about yourself, understanding your true nature, Everything But the Rain is all about that. It's all about Ichigo learning where his power comes from and what makes him who he really is. And there's also this notion in the 1,000-Year Blood War arc that Ichigo is becoming, or has become, a true Shinigami, a member of the Shinigami, no longer just a substitute Soul Reaper, but someone who can rub shoulders with the Gotei 13's greatest as a true member of Soul Society. This is mentioned by a number of people, including the Zero Division themselves, when Ichibei notes that Ichigo has become a true Shinigami after completing his training in the Royal Palace. But where does this idea of finding out the truth about yourself come into Ichigo's true Bankai? Well, again, this is supposedly his true Zanpakuto. We find out the true version of Zangetsu itself after Everything But the Rain, when Ichigo learns to understand where all of his powers come from. He finally realizes that he and Zangetsu are not just partners, they are in fact one and the same. They are one being, and they're intrinsically linked. You know, that's why Ichigo is able to finally get his true dual-bladed Zanpakuto. Another thing that's important to note before we go into that final battle itself is Ichigo's power sources. While it can seem convoluted on the surface, it is actually fairly simple when you break it down. Ichigo's father is a Shinigami, his mother is a Quincy, and she was bitten by a Holo, which meant that she gained some Holo Reiatsu. To save Masaki's life, because those two are completely unstable and would have killed her, Isshin, the Shinigami, bound himself to her physically, thereby entwining all of those Reiatsu into one. Ichigo is the result of that, a perfect hybrid. And Ichigo goes into the final battle against Yhwach with all of those Reiatsu in tow. A number of people have wondered why Ichigo never uses a Holo Mask again after the Arrancar arc. Well, that's because the Arrancar arc is all about Ichigo's descent into that nature of being a Holo. Him using the Holo Mask is not natural. It's supposed to be an abomination, a bastardization of what Ichigo actually is. Yes, it's really cool, and yes, it grants him loads of extra power, but at the end of the day, the Arrancar arc is about him overcoming the Holo within and understanding that it's actually a part of him, a part of his power set. That's what Tensa Zangetsu fusing with White at the very end of Deicide is supposed to represent, and that's why he doesn't use a Holo Mask in the future. After that moment, once he defeats Aizen, once he's used Mugetsu, you never see a Holo Mask on him again. And that's because he's supposed to have taken a grand leap forward in merging all of his powers together. The Holo Mask appearing physically on Ichigo's face designates a separation between that and his Shinigami self, whereas now they are more attuned, they are more one. But of course, in the Thousand Year Blood War arc, that does kind of get thrown out of the window when you discover that Zangetsu is actually Yhwach, or a remnant of Ichigo's Quincy powers. However, Ichigo, now being considerably more mature than he's ever been in the past, accepts that as one, readily accepts that even though Zangetsu may have lied to him about who he is, he's still intrinsically a part of him. And so all of those powers are inside Ichigo when he goes to face Yhwach in the Royal Palace at the very end of the series. We see this in full force, of course, when he activates his Quincy powers and one of his blades turns white, again showing a real perfect fusion between everything he has. He gains a hollow horn on his head, similar to the horn he had when he defeated Ulquiorra. He gains a dark hollow-style eye, and I believe there's also hollow tattoos running down him going towards his chest, where a hollow hole of sorts seems to have formed. And yet, of course, crucially, he retains his mind through all of this. So this is a perfect fusion of all of Ichigo's powers. He has Zanpakuto, but one of them is white, denoting the Quincy powers, and he also has various hollow attributes to his body as well, and he does exhibit strength befitting of this. He then activates his Bankai Tensa Zangetsu while still in possession of all these powers, I might add, and he does so by combining his swords together. So this version of Tensa Zangetsu is supposed to represent, I guess, a perfect version of all of his powers combined. However, Yhwach pretty swiftly puts a stop to that and breaks the blade in two. After this, Ichigo tries to continue to put up a fight, but you see over time his powers slowly revert back to how he was when he first started the battle. Yhwach breaks off his hollow horn, the darkness in his eye begins to recede, and eventually he returns to just looking like a regular old Ichigo. And here we get the most crucial moment of the story of Ichigo's true Bankai. After being defeated by Yhwach in chapter 680, Yhwach then steals Ichigo's powers, and this is the moment where we really get to the core of what it means to be Ichigo's true self. And actually Kubo spells it out for us, essentially. Yhwach steals all of Ichigo's Quincy power from him, and at the same time unknowingly takes his hollow powers as well, and Ichigo literally says, "My Quincy power and the hollow power that was attached to it, it's all fading away, it's all turning into white." And obviously Kubo's symbolism is incredibly strong, it always has been, but this is very literally saying, I think, that Ichigo has lost his Quincy and hollow powers completely. And Kubo is choosing to end the series by making Ichigo a pure Shinigami, nothing else. And I think that makes sense. As I said, that feeds back into this idea of everybody finding the true nature of themselves, finding their true selves. Ichibei commenting that Ichigo is becoming a true Shinigami. This is that in its most literal form. So Ichigo, as an amalgamation of all the races, has lost to Yhwach's almighty power, and you see that both physically and literally. Yhwach steals all of his powers, ripping away his Quincy powers that his mother gave him, and the Holo Reiatsu that came with it, leaving Ichigo with just his Shinigami powers, and you see a visual representation of that as Ichigo collapses to the ground, what was left of his Holo Horn crumbles to nothing. So what then is up with the true Bankai? Why does it look the way it does, and why does it shatter during that very final moment? And I think it comes down to a simple case of symbolism. Like I said, when Ichigo uses the Bankai the first time, he is still an amalgamation of all races, and the Bankai is supposed to represent that. The white outer casing is supposed to represent the mixture of his Quincy and Holo powers, while the inner blackness is supposed to represent the true nature of Ichigo, that of a Shinigami. And that's why it breaks during that final moment, because now Ichigo has no Quincy or Holo power left in him. He's attacking Yhwach with simply the raw power of a Shinigami. That's why when Yhwach goes to clash it, the white casing disintegrates because Ichigo no longer has those powers. He is just a pure Shinigami, and he cuts Yhwach in two with a blade that heavily resembles his old Shikai. And the reasoning behind that, in my opinion, again, is pure symbolism. Ichigo's original Shikai, the huge bread knife that he wields throughout the Soul Society arc and some of the Arrancar arc, is the closest thing we have in Bleach to Ichigo's Ichigo being nothing but a pure Shinigami. Because from the very beginning, Ichigo has had the traces of the Holo inside him and stuff like that, but for the majority of, say, the Soul Society arc, Ichigo is just using his Shinigami powers. Yes, of course, Zangetsu, the Quincy, shows up at one point, Ichigo's Holo comes out during the fight with Byakuya, but for the most part, during his seminal battles against Renji, against Kenpachi, against Byakuya, he is really using Shinigami powers for the most part, and that original Shikai of Ichigo's is the closest thing we have to a visual representation of Ichigo just being a Shinigami. It's definitely difficult to wrap your head around, and like I said, none of this is fact. This is all my opinion based on what I have read and my understanding of the situation. However, we know, of course, that Hashwolf sees a vision of the future, which he then projects to Yhwach to try and warn him that Ichigo will kill him with a visual representation of Ichigo's old Shikai. Now, Hashwolf, not being anywhere near as skilled with the Almighty as Yhwach, sends him something that doesn't look quite right. Ichigo is wearing his old Shikai gear, Yhwach looks considerably younger, but the general gist of the future is there. Ichigo will kill Yhwach with a representation of his old Shikai that denotes him at his purest state as a Shinigami before now. So it does take a bit of a roundabout explanation to finally get there, but just to really break it down and make it as simplistic as possible, going into the final battle, Ichigo is made up of his father, a Shinigami, his mother, a Quincy, and the Holo that is attached to that Quincy Reiatsu. Defeating him, Yhwach robs him of his Quincy powers and the Holo that goes with it as well, leaving Ichigo just a Shinigami. So when it comes down to finishing the fight, the white casing on the Bankai breaks away, revealing Ichigo's old Shikai, essentially, which is now his true Bankai, killing Yhwach, just as Hashwolf prophesied, even though Hashwolf's prophecy was slightly inaccurate due to his inability to use the Almighty correctly. Like I said, it is a little bit confusing, and I could be completely wrong, but I think that's what it comes down to. It comes down to this idea of finding and understanding your true self, which is a big running theme of the 1,000-Year Blood War arc. It comes down to the truth of Ichigo's heritage and what he is left with inside when most of that is robbed away from him, and the true nature of him as a Shinigami, which again is alluded to throughout the final arc. So I really hope that was helpful. Let me know in the comments below if you agree with me on what you think is going on in that final moment with Ichigo's true Bankai against Yhwach arc. Do you think that that is supposed to be a visual representation of the moment Ichigo was mostly a Shinigami? Yes, he uses this Shikai during the Arrancar arc, but like I said, the Arrancar arc is really an in-depth exploration of the corruptive powers of a Holo, and Ichigo spends a lot of time time in that arc in Bankai as opposed to Shikai. So that's why Kubo uses the imagery of Soul Society Shikai Ichigo to evoke this feeling of him being a true Shinigami. Alright guys, but I really hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments below if I'm completely off on what I think's going on here, or if you happen to agree with me. I'd love to hear what you have to say below. Go and check out one of my other videos. I've just done a huge 40-minute in-depth review and discussion of Can't Fear Your Own World Volume 2, so I'd really appreciate if you check that out. The link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe, maybe check out the Patreon if you like what I do here, and until then, I'll catch you next time. See you later, guys.